Welcome everybody. On behalf of IMEA, the State Department of Ed, and District 3, I would like to welcome you to today's virtual PD opportunity. Jimmy Lawrence is the band director at South Middle School in the Nampa School District. This session explores multiple ways Logic Pro X can be used to generate study materials and assignments, support synchronous and asynchronous instruction, and reinforce essential music technology competencies. Main concepts tonight will include scoring, engraving, visual and aural aids, live presentation, and potential student applications that can be used in and out of the classroom. Today's presentation will be recorded and can be viewed later on the IMEA YouTube channel, where you will be able to access all of these virtual PD opportunities. There is also credit available for viewing these sessions, and the information can be found on the IMEA website. Feel free to ask questions during the presentation in the chat, as I will be monitoring them and making sure they are addressed at the end. I would like to thank the leadership from District 3, IMEA, and the State Department of Education for providing these opportunities. Please remember that we are trying to continue these presentations throughout the fall and are still looking for volunteers to present on their expertise. I will put my email in the chat, and please reach out if you have something to share. We have 3 sessions lined up for November, and we'll be advertising those by the end of this week. Thanks again for being here, and without any further interruptions from me, I will turn the time over and welcome Jimmy Lawrence. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and for the opportunity to share this with the other educators. I don't know a ton of people that are doing this, but I was first exposed to it over at Azusa Pacific University by Dr. Phil Shackleton, and he kind of got me really excited to do this because you know, I was using it for composition, but he was using it in his teaching of composition, and I just thought a lot of these things were very extensible to what we do in our classrooms, you know, not just in band, for instance, but you know, general music ed, choir. I think there's so many applications for this software that I just want to share with you all the possibilities that it affords. So I think you guys can see me. I can't see myself, so if I look silly, I apologize. But to put it really simply, we're going to talk about these things. So we're going to look at creating study materials and assignments, how this can support our synchronous, asynchronous, and hybrid instruction, and of course in person as well. I'm using it in person, and I used my students today. I kind of tested them out on some of the templates I developed for you guys. So we'll look at these essential music technology experiences for students, because at some point your students might go into the field, and if they have some familiarity with using something like Logic Pro, which is a DAW, digital audio workstation, I think they'll be kind of one-upped. They'll have a one-up in a way, you know, to their compared to their colleagues and friends. So one of the big things that probably is kind of ignored in Logic Pro is its scoring and engraving capabilities. I can't say that it will like 100% rival Sibelius or Finale or Dorico or any of those high-end engraving softwares, but that's not kind of its focus. It's kind of, I like to think of it as being like a performer-composer's DAW. So maybe you need to, as a composer, you might need to push out a quick demo with a score for your musicians to perform, you know, maybe even the same day, and this is something that you can actually do with Logic. So. But in the classroom, we want to see, like, how can we use this? So visual, aural aids, how can you use this in live presentation, kind of like what I'm doing right now, and some potential student applications if your students ever have an opportunity to use Logic Pro, you know, maybe in a lab setting or something like that, depending on what kind of content you teach. So here's some things about Logic Pro. So what are some of the visual elements inside Logic Pro? And I'll show these to you, maybe not every single item, but we'll talk about, I'll show each little component here as much as is necessary for now. Of course, there's a ton to it, and you could go into weeks and weeks and weeks and months into learning one particular aspect of this program. But we don't need to do that. We're going to focus on what can we do really quick if you know how to use a score editor. And again, I said before, this isn't really a how-to. It's more of a demonstration and more of a what is possible, and it's I don't think this is even scratching the surface because I'm still, experimenting with it and trying new things and seeing what can I do with my students, what is helpful for my students, and when, probably more importantly, when not to use it, right? There's always, don't use technology for technology's sake, but use it if it supports your students' learning in a way that's maybe faster or better than what you could normally do in the classroom. So take some of this stuff with a grain of salt because I'm still experimenting too. So some of the things present in Logic Pro. So the visual information you're getting from Logic is you have a tracks window, you have a mixer, a piano roll, audio editor, score editor. That's the big one we're going to kind of focus on the most today because we're often looking at music. We have various list editors in Logic. Sound library, so synthesis. Are you able to produce a certain kind of sound you want your students to hear? And there's some other things I don't even really experiment with that much. A step sequencer. The environment window in Logic is probably the thing that sets it apart the most from all of the other DAWs out there. It's really powerful, but it's also very complex. You can do some really interesting things with it if you know how, but you got to have kind of a programmer's mindset to get there. And of course, there's more to the visuals in Logic. It's a pretty big program. Okay, now the processes, some of the things that we can do in Logic. If you're familiar with the DAW, you'll know most of this stuff. If you're not familiar with the DAW, here are the things you can do with it. So you can edit MIDI data and audio data. You can record audio, MIDI. You can have it play live, playback live for you. Something I call live synthesis. So people actually perform using Logic Pro and a MIDI controller. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. A lot of people use Apple loops in Logic and create entire, electronica pieces or even, traditional pieces using loops and just manipulating the loops the way they want. And then, of course, there's something I mentioned here, visual interpretation of musical elements. So you can see on the left column we have one thing that's going to be interpreted by the score editor. And that's a big way to think about this when it comes to scoring in Logic, or engraving if you want to call it that. We have to think of scoring as a music before graphics concept. So if you're in Sibelius or Finale or maybe MuseScore or something like that, you're kind of dragging a note onto the screen, and then you can get a sound out of it, depending on the software that you have. But in this case, you're kind of recording MIDI data before the fact, and then the score editor takes that and interprets it into something that should be meaningful to a performer, right? So let's continue here. So here's some things you're going to need. You'll need an Apple device, a Mac or a MacBook. I'm not sure there's Logic Pro on the iPad yet, but Apple is kind of moving towards their own silicon for things, so there might be some changes in the upcoming years. You'll need a MIDI controller, and here's some possibilities. So you can see I got this picture here. I actually have this with me, and I use it in my classroom. And this is kind of the preferred controller. I prefer to use a larger keyboard, but that's because I'm a pianist, right? This thing is plenty adequate to get some stuff done. You might do better with another half octave because it gets a little awkward. But there are other types of MIDI controllers. So guitar, you've got the GK3 from Roland, or the 3B for bass guitar. There's the Fishman Triple Play, or there's the Hexpander from I forget the name, Graphtec Ghost Hexpander, and that's some guitar pickups that will output MIDI for you. So that's really useful. Some of you may have heard of the EWI or the Aerophone. Roland's got one. I forgot who makes the EWI. I might be getting them mixed up, but it's a MIDI controller that is for people who play winds. Very useful. And of course, there's V-drums. You might have seen behind me, I've got some V-drums back here, and I've actually used it in composition and in creating exercises in Logic. And you could even use a V-accordion. It's a possibility. It is a MIDI device, and it will do the thing. Okay, you also need a microphone, some way to record, right? You can pair it with an audio interface. I have an audio interface here using a Blue Spark mic. And that's a little bit more complex, but as you can see later on, a lot of these things that you can do in Logic, you don't even need all of this stuff. You can just use your Mac and connect it to a projector to show to students, and that's kind of what I have in my classroom. I have basically the Mac plugged into my sound system at the school, and this little MIDI controller here, and it gets a lot of interesting things done in class. Now, if you're looking for a more stable system, of course you want some sort of sound system, all of this stuff that goes with that, cables and whatnot, USB cables and sound cables and auxiliary cables, all the kinds of things that you're used to. So I wanted to try and get as quickly as possible into what can you do with Logic, and I'm going to show you rather than give you a presentation like this all over. This is more for me than for you. So let's check it out. Okay, so one of the first things you'll notice is the way that my window looks maybe doesn't look the way that you're familiar with seeing a DAW, right? You might see more audio waveforms and things like that. In this case, there's a lot of MIDI going on. You can see I can select all my different tracks. So that's the tracks window. And we have a score editor right here built in. Now, this doesn't just show up automatically. You actually have to bring it in for yourself. But you can actually pull this out and have it stand alone as the score editor. Or you can just edit right in here if you'd like. You manipulate the screen the way you best think will, the way it will best work for you in your situation, and it depends on the template too. So what are some things you can do? So let's talk about synthesis, okay? So this is great for hybrid and in-person. It is certainly possible to play some stuff for your students just like now, live online. So, if you're thinking, well, how can I use this in the classroom? Like, you could also kind of think, well, what's going on right now in this presentation, right? So I've got this little MIDI controller here. I don't know how much you can see, but you can see I just created this little bass line here. This is a blues. This is the blues template, right? So a sample template for the jazz band. So right away you can say, well, boy, I'm in hybrid. My bassist isn't here on A and B days, or on the A days, Mondays and Thursdays, or whatever it happens to be for your situation. Well, you can fill in the gap even if you're not a bassist if you've got some basic piano skills. Now, even if you don't have some basic piano skills, you can always compose yourself a bass line. Right? Now, in this case, for me, what I do in my classroom is I just play the bass line for them because it's quick and easy, 12-bar blues, no big deal for me. But you can set up these templates ahead of time, and so everything's ready. You don't have to create things right in front of your students necessarily. However, if you need to give a quick example and you got your keyboard right next to you and you just need to play a chord, right? You have that accessible to you right away. Right, and all of the fun effects that come with that. So it can be kind of fun for the students, depending on their attitudes. Right now, I think everyone's kind of like, oh, more tech. But, it's a strange time we're in. So you can fill in the missing instrumentation for your groups, right? So live synthesis, using the sounds available to you. You got piano here. Hopefully you guys can hear that. I'm going to check back real quick, make sure everything's going good. Okay, no comments as far as I know. I don't have access to the chat, so let's go back over here. Okay. Oh, I shouldn't have clicked on it. Okay, so now there's some other things you can do using synthesis, creating sounds on the fly, listening back to things or playing along. So you can have your students check intonation. Of course, with MIDI, right, you're going to have the one tone, and it depends on the sound patch that you might have, right? You might want a straighter tone that doesn't have all that flair and all that special effects, so that you can have a nice good tuning and things like that. But you can demonstrate this to your student, like, what does it sound like when these two notes play together? Right? That's always, I think it's pretty helpful, to have students hear it in that way. And that's something you can demonstrate just by clicking on this and then playing the note. right? Pretty easy, pretty fast, pretty accessible. If you have your template ready to go, you just click on where you need to, what you need to hear, and you play it, right? Okay, so other things you can to consider is like you can emphasize the style, like for your jazz band, maybe just like this sound patch here where it kind of swells. Right, you can make that as a demonstration to your students when you're talking about long tones and things like that. You can talk about balance. You can have, well, what does it sound like if the trumpets are coming out on top? What if they're a little bit louder than the rest of the group? Or what if the bones need to come out a little better? You can make those demonstrations right here on the fly and just give it to them. Right, and you can even show them the balance difference between 3 different pitches, 4 different pitches. You can even put it in here in the score editor and edit the level of each note. Maybe you want your pianist to voice their chords a little better so the top note plays louder, and you can show them what that sounds like without having to be a great pianist, right? So, okay, so there's some hybrid and in-person stuff you can do right away with just like a basic template like this. So some asynchronous things. What can you do with this? Well, you can send the students a backing track with all of the sounds right here. You don't have to have somebody to come in and record. You can do short sections. You could just send them 4 bars and here's your thing to listen to, play along with it, right? You can say, I want you to play along with the bass and piano part, and but you can't hear your own part, so now you got to be independent from what you're hearing. And of course, depending on the patch that you have, you can also make sure that those intonation that you're helping your band intonate. So let's go to notation, right? So there's a lot of stuff here, and for me, this is kind of what I focus on. I would like to get more into the recording thing, but I don't have a lot of gear, so but I can still talk about that. So what are some things you can do? Change comp patterns. So remember, this is the jazz band template, so we'll kind of use jazz band terminology here, but you can see we got like some piano comp going on, right? You can change these patterns. There's some shortcuts you can use right away, and there you go, right? So if you know your shortcuts, you can change the comp patterns, you can alter them, you can alter the chords. There's a whole bunch of things you can do right away, and on top of that, you can take, maybe we're just going to take the top note here, and we're going to give it to these guys, your B-flat instruments. There you go. Now they have a horn comp that they can play along with, right? So I'm hoping maybe you guys can see that I can take this within a short minute and create maybe a comp pattern like this, put it in the horns, and if I want to, I could give them different notes, right? So there's some possibilities there right away, and then you get instant playback. Right? A little graphical aural problem there. So there's some things you can do right away, right? And I've done this stuff with my band. I'll give them a comp pattern and say, okay, we're going to play the blues. You're going to play it on the root, right? Because I'm in middle school, so we're going to play on the root. And then pretty soon, like maybe, bones, you're going to play the thirds and the sevenths, and trumpets, you're going to play the fifth, and you can do things like that, and give them a nice sound demo right away so that they have it in their head before they even start. And of course, you don't have to approach everything that way. You could approach it the opposite direction and say, oh, what did you play? What was your horn comp? Turn it around, put it back in there, and they can see it in notation. So having those, especially for those visual learners, they can go, oh, that's what it looks like. Oh, that makes sense, So what else can you do? Well, you can quickly alter chord voicings. Let's say I want to take this and not press the wrong button. That would be good. Okay, what did I just do? Flat 6? I don't know. Probably not a good voicing, but it's a possibility. Maybe you want to have your pianist take it down here and put it in a left-hand situation. Right? So now they're playing left-hand comp, and the right hand is free to improvise or play the melody. Those kinds of things. So you notice it's very quick that what you can do in Logic, and all it is here's the piano roll that I mentioned before. Let's kind of look at. I'm going to click on the piano here. Okay, Here's what those horn comps look like, or excuse me, the piano comps look like. Okay, and if you got students that maybe are used to something like playing around with synesthesia, or I forget if that's the right name of the program, or I don't know, if you're older like me, maybe like GarageBand, Guitar Hero, those kinds of things, they can see this stuff in a piano roll, and it's like, oh, that kind of makes sense to me, you know, a different way of looking at the music, how it's represented on a piano roll like this. So there's some more things there. Okay, so walking bass, I kind of talked about that, and you can alter. Let's say you know, you're showing your bassist how to walk between, you know, or walk on the same chord for 4 measures. You're showing them those chromatic encapsulations and all those kinds of crazy things. Well, you can fix up the bass line that's already there, or maybe you have one in a chart that you think sounds really lame, and you're like, I think I could make that better. You know, maybe I want to do a little bit more chromatic encapsulations. You know, those kinds of things. So, right, kind of fix some funny problems there. There's all things you can do, all kinds of things you can do with bass lines. You can alter the style of the bass line live on, you know, maybe you're going to turn it into a bossa nova and turn off the swing. You can do that pretty quickly. Okay, what's some more things? Bassists, showing them 2-step, half time, double time. You can see the possibilities here. So let's look at simplifying drum patterns. Okay, so same thing. You have to use something called a mapped, let's see, a mapped instrument in order to make sure this displays correctly. But there's one built in. I just wish they would have listened to the Percussive Arts Society and actually put things in the right place so I didn't have to do it myself manually. But now it's in a template, so I have it forever and ever, and I don't have to worry about that. Right? So once you get it fixed up, that's fine. And if you guys are ever interested in pulling up Logic and thinking, boy, I could really use this, if you need help with building your template or fixing, you know, those mapped instrument styles or anything like that, I'm here, right? Just send me an email. So what kind of things you can do with the drum pattern? Well, like, let's say your drummer's not ready for comping yet. Well, you can go ahead and mute that. And you see they're grayed out, and they'll just hear their part. I can solo their part and listen just to the drums and work with the drummer for a second. Right? Maybe you just want to delete those notes. Pretty easy to do that, right? Maybe you're going to take these little 8th note patterns out and really simplify it. You know, you got someone who's just coming in, fresh into jazz band, barely knows how to count, but we're going to get them going, right? So that's the thing you can do right away. Right? And it still sounds like jazz, so it's good. Okay. Now, you can also do the same thing that I showed you with the piano. I can take this, copy it, put it somewhere else, right? Put it at the original position where it was. Change the note to something meaningful, you know. There you go. And there it is. And you get a preview of the sound as well in case you, you know, make a mistake and you're thinking you're putting a B natural instead of a B flat. All right, so there's some things there. Now, as you can see, I built out this whole blues form, right? Really simple blues form. And I put some examples here just so you can see what is possible. I'm going to show you something a little bigger in a second. But you notice this little thing here, right? I kind of took the notes and colored them, gave them different note heads, right? So chord tones, 1, 3, 5, 7, octave, 2, 4, 6, right? Or 9, 11, 13, if you want to think of it that way. I even put this as a diamond just so they kind of know it's kind of an avoid note if you want to think of it that way. You want to make sure you go back to a chord tone after you hit that note, or don't hang out on that note too much, you know. So this you can see it's very similar to what you might see in it's kind of the older Aebersold stuff. You give them these notes, and then they improvise over it, right? You can mute the notes if you want, so that they don't have that going on. And there's some ways to like have it visible as well and still have it not play back. I just didn't set it up that way just yet. So there's right away you can build a chart for your students, and just so you see it in action, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it right here, paste it, unmute it, and look, it's already transposed, right? And they can hear it too if you want. right? So it depends on the type of staff style that you have, and that's something we can talk about at some point in the future if you're interested. But you know, the score editor is pretty robust, and it has these things that are just kind of built into it just because it's interpreting the score a certain way. So this note isn't C, of course, right? You can see up here, well, it's A sharp 2 or B flat 2, whatever you want to call it. So it's just displaying this note in a way that makes sense for a B flat instrument. Okay, so you can see right away we can create instant exercises for your students. Here's like a little horn comp kind of thing, or a little melody, right? Okay, so we're doing like kind of pentascale stuff, emphasizing the root and seventh so they get used to that, and then you can copy it all across however you want with whatever rhythm that you come up with, even on the fly. Chord outlining, right? Doing these bebop scale kind of thing, right? Right, and you can just list that all out, create various different kinds of alternatives to this thing, and your students will hopefully enjoy that. So let me take this, I'm going to increase the speed here. So let's open what's called a track or a project alternative. And I'm going to show you, I made this chart. I'll go ahead and save. Hopefully it doesn't break. So I made this chart really quick. And it's just like this riff-based blues, the same thing over and over again. And all I did was copy and paste, right? So here it is. And there you go. You have an instant blues for your students to work on in that key. And guess what? You can also take the entire thing and transpose it all, right? Change it to a new key. You're going to work in the key of F now. And we're going to get you going on the F blues, and maybe just change the melody a little bit, or just redo it, right? All kinds of stuff that can happen there easily. So let's look over here. You notice I did some recording. So let's talk about the recording section really quick. So this is another thing obviously useful for our students, being able to record them and hear them play back, and like, are you in tune, are you in time, all those kinds of things, because when they're playing in the moment, you know that the perception of what they're experiencing right then might be off from what is actually happening in the band, right? Especially our middle schoolers, they're just like, there's so much going on in their heads at the that it's kind of hard to analyze on top of that, right? Well, we can do some of that analysis for them. Let's select this here. See if I can make it so I can see it properly. There we go. Okay, we have this. Let's see, make sure we're on take one. And I've been having a little bit of finickiness with this because I don't actually use this feature too much. So it's not that it's new to me, it's just I'm not super comfortable with it. Now, here's a cool thing with Logic. You want to work with the students' actual audio recordings? Well, this is the same stuff they do in the studios, auto-tune, right? This is how you can edit the pitch of things. You can actually see it represented on this kind of piano roll that's going on over here. You can actually alter the pitch, whether it sinks, rises. You can remove, right? So let's take a listen. I'm going to solo that. Okay, well, how did that sound originally, right? Let's try right here, take one. Right? You can slow this stuff down, you can turn down the tempo, you can make a tempo map. There's so many things you can do with this. You can edit the student's pitch and say, no, really, you are flat, I promise you. Here's how it sounds like when it's not flat, right? You can raise the pitch a little bit. Or you can even change the note if you want. Oop. Like I said, I'm not super comfortable with this yet, but... Right? Now I have two things going on at the same time. But you can change the notes. Right? So there's a lot of things, you know, you can make it super in tune, or you could show them what it's like when it's really out of tune. And notice that, like, I've got these two different takes in the same track, right? So here's another thing you can do for your students. Like, let's say you are recording every single one of your students, maybe once a week, or like for each session. Well, you can record a take for week 1, and then 2 weeks later you got a playing test. How'd it go? Compare the 2 takes, right? Now you have a record of their progress that's measurable. So there's some audio options for you there. What are some other things you can do? So obviously you can record, right, and create a backing track. You can have the click track going with it, so we have a metronome built in right here. A little hard to hear in this case, but there is a click track. You can edit that, how loud it is and even what sound it is and what pitch. It's pretty powerful in that way. Maybe you're using these recordings for your drummer, and the drummer is playing along with the recording, and they're the only ones with the monitors, and they're kind of leading the band in that way, right? So I mentioned kind of those formative assessments. You can kind of show students the progress. It's like something's going on over here. Okay. And save those take folders. Write their name in it. And there you go. You can even write their name and the date. It is possible to do that. But like I said, I don't want to do too much on the how-to. I just kind of want to show you all the different things that are going on. And we're starting to get pretty close on time. So what was I showing you over here? So flex pitch, right? Flexible pitch. How can we edit the pitch, what our students are hearing? And there's also flex time. You can move those recordings to be right on time or a little bit late. Maybe you want to show the drummer what it sounds like to lay back a bit. And you can do that with individual notes as well, which is kind of wild. So some asynchronous things that you can do. Like maybe your students don't have Logic Pro. Maybe they've got these MacBook Airs or something. And well, GarageBand is free, and Logic, if you've ever seen GarageBand, it's kind of looks like Logic Lite, and it actually has a lot of the same functions, just not as robust, right? So you can actually edit these documents and send them as GarageBand files to your students, and then they can just record at home, like with the most basic tools that they need. They don't need all this stuff that we have. And on top of that, biggest thing you can do with these templates, you can create end products, right? Studio quality recordings, if you really wanted to go that far, but maybe some of us do for certain purposes, and you can send these away to your parents and make your videos and do all the kind of high-level production editing you want, or just hit record, and that's what you get, right? So I'll show you really quick one more template from here. Here's a blank, and I think it's actually not blank because I used it to do a baseline for my students today. Yeah, I did. There it is. Right, but right away you can quickly just start recording and say, okay, I'm going to make this little thing. Okay, and there you go. You're making a melody right off the bat, and then you could even, sorry trombone player, you're going to have to hit that note. Copy it, paste it to another place, put it in the right range. Maybe you do want them to play that, but just maybe there, right? There you go. Very quickly you can create a chart right in front of your students' faces and say, hey, you're going to play this now. You know these notes, so let's play these notes. All right, cool. Let's move on to the next thing really quickly. I'm going to skip on ahead to, I'm not going to save that. I'm going to skip on ahead to something you can create in Logic. You notice that I use the score editor, and you can create worksheets just like you normally would in Finale. Here's like a clef marker or a C marker kind of thing that I've done usually for my piano students, but create activities, play and say the note names, label the clef notes, name the notes, label the markers, and then even cut out a nice little flashcard thing right in Logic Pro. This was all in there, right? So there's another thing you can do. Let's see, I lost Logic. I'm going to open it from here, and let's check out beginning band template. I used this a lot today, and I just created it recently. So this is kind of like the, let's see, where are we at? Kind of skipping ahead. Um, I call this the beginning band toolbox. So lots of things you can do here, but just because I want to see, I'm sure you guys just want to look at this and go, what can I use it for? Like right now, like how fast can I make this stuff happen? Well, if you want, I could even send you a template. But look, I've got here a breathing exercise. I actually have the students with the metronome. Breathe in. You guys know breathing gym, right? Holding the breath, and out 8. And so on, right? And they go through this whole exercise. I kind of jokingly said, boy, I could just, set this to play and then walk away. It was almost half true. I could probably do that, but, then my attention isn't so much on this. Of course, for my 6th graders, I'd walk them through the whole thing and kind of narrate as we go, right? So you can see the score. It's actually quite a simple score. Everything's just copy pasted. I made this little drum exercise for them. Long tones, you can see you can kind of label everything. So later on, if you're using this, you're like, oh, we need to kind of take care of some lip slurs here. Let's go ahead and play our lip slurs, right? And you got the exercises all here. And the way I listed it out is, we've got E flat instruments up here, B flat instruments, horn, that's you, right? And then for my concert instruments, I just gave them a grand staff and said, well, you're either top note, middle note, or bottom note, right? So something you can use right away. You can put these breath marks in there. All of this stuff is pretty simple to do once you know how to do the score editor. Scales, right? Little pentascales for my beginners. Working out here. No, they're not doing double strokes yet. That was just a pie in the sky thought. Tuning, right? They can listen to the note. And then they hum it. And now they play it. Right? And while they're playing it, they're adjusting. You're tuning them right here in time. How convenient. Little counting exercise, right? So maybe I want them to get those subdivisions in their head while they're counting. So I have them run this whole thing, right? Quarter note review. Different patterns. A little bit of counting help for some of them. Tied notes, right? All of this stuff is possible and wasn't too difficult to make. And now I have a template that I can change, alter, make more advanced anytime I want. Right, so these are all those possibilities here. So the synthesis thing, like we can keep going on, what sounds do you need to use in the band right away? Like, do you need to wet a reed before you play? Not necessarily. You can just quickly give them a note, right? You can use drones. This is one thing I didn't really do in there. Make some drones or some, I think it's called bourdons, right? From if you're an ORF person, you can kind of create these things where your students can play along with it. Okay, so I'm going to leave this up for a second, and I'm thinking we're running out of time, right? We're at 7:43.
Yeah, we can open up for questions, or we can see one more example and then questions.
Sure. Well, let's take some questions. Maybe someone has something I can demonstrate right away, or who knows?
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
All of that score editing that you do, how do you share that with your students? Do you just show it while they're online, or can you print it out for them, or?
Well, I'm in hybrid right now, so I actually have them in the classroom, just half of them at a time, and I just have it up on the projector.
Oh, nice.
Yep. Now, just like I'm doing right here, I could do this. Well, like I said, we're going online here on Thursday, so I will probably do this, screen share with the kids, play it along, and they're going to warm up, right? And I'm going to monitor them on my second screen, making sure they're actually doing it. So that's a couple options. Whether you're synchronous or in person or hybrid.
So if you want them to practice at home using that same thing, do you just send them, do they all have to have Logic Pro, or is this something that they can?
Nope. You can print this stuff out for them. You can also, GarageBand does have like a limited version of this score editor. And if you're not doing anything crazy, I think you can get most of the same stuff sent to your students. I haven't really messed with GarageBand yet because all of our students are one-to-one on like these really awful laptops.
Okay.
So they don't have an Apple anything to work with. But I can just create a track, a play along track. Just hit record, bounce the track to a sound file, and then send them a score. Right? I can edit the score like this. Right? And there they go. And I can lay this out nicer for their eyes. In a way that makes more sense for them to play along with. But it's all here, and I can just print it out really quickly without any editing. Let's go to that. And then on Mac, I can open it in preview.
Yeah.
And there it is. I have a preview before I even print it out, just make sure everything's good. And this is what the kid can play. Send this out to all your E-flat instruments, and there you go.
Nice. Dr. Ganon is also saying that you can export the playback audio for them as an MP3.
Yep.
And you could even make a video with screen capture and show everything in the score with sound in real time. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's something I haven't tried yet, is like recording the screen playing. But that would be, thanks, Dr. Ganong, that's actually a great idea. Something I can do, send a video, right? Instead of having to be live necessarily. I wish I could see the chat. I don't know what's going on in there. Any more questions? I feel like
coming up.
Nothing's coming up.
Yeah.
H, I believe. Maybe Command H, Apple over there.
Let's try it. Nothing. Bummer. Well, that's okay. So I can share a little bit more.
I got a
How are we
question.
doing? Yes.
Okay, so let's say that that I am not an accomplished pianist, as I currently am not, and I want to help a student with voicings for jazz bands, so that they're not just playing like 1-3 on every chord.
Yeah.
I give them something to work on or practice.
So like well, of course you'd have to know, what is a good jazz voicing, but a lot of our curriculum, they're built right in, they step them up from maybe like a, root third seventh kind of situation, to like a simple, shell voicing. That's kind of how Essential Elements kind of works out. I think it kind of starts out with really basic chords and then builds upon that as it goes along. So you can just take those examples from your curriculum and plop them in there. Maybe I should open up that jazz band one. Close. Don't save.
Jimmy, how long did it take for you to be able to notate, or do you just do it through the MIDI?
Oh, well, like I just hit record and then I play I play what I want to hear.
Okay.
I'll even do that on the drums. I could use my electronic kit to just play it in there. And any electronic drum set that has any sort of MIDI out will interface with Logic, and it will just spit out the notes the way that you want, as long as you play in time. So it's kind of a reason I mentioned all those different MIDI controllers, because you might have somebody who's a winds player who doesn't touch piano or anything else. But if they play winds, well, they got the controller right there, and they can just play the notes right in by hitting record, play it in time right in front of their students, and then it just displays right there, in the score.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of options for different instrumentalists. Let's see. Dr. Gnong was asking about those like chord voicings, right? Let's look at this alternative here. I think I still have the screen shared, right?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. So let's say you just have a basic knowledge of the chords, and you use your MIDI controller, and you get your hand ready, and you're gonna go, okay, I got the root, third, and the seventh. Record. There you go. There's your chord. Right, and you can manipulate it, edit it however you want. You know, put it into whichever hand you want to see it in. Right. Maybe alter the voicing in a strange way. You could be pretty inventive with it. Of course, you want to know what you're going to display to your students. Maybe your student already plays the basic chords, and you can get them to just chunk them out really quick for you. There is, just like in Sibelius and Finale, there's a way to just actually put the notes out there. I think you can even drag them in. I don't do this, but you can just drag them in where you want. Right? So there's some familiar activities to those people who would be really new to the score editor and Logic. But I think the best way really is to, just play it in with whatever you have available to do that with, even if you have like the most basic piano skills. Okay, that's kind of all I got for now. There's always more. Do we have Rebecca? Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
sweet.
nothing's coming in the chat. So if you want to show one more thing, I think you have time.
Oh, cool. Okay, let's do it. Let's see. I'll hit the jazz angle again really quick. This is maybe not for band directors, or maybe so. This is something I was kind of working on for my jazz piano students. Let's take a look at something like let's pick that one. It's been a while since I looked at them. So here's another thing you can do with notation. If you're working with jazz piano students, or really any student, but you can give them an etude and a tune. Hopefully we're not breaking any copyright issues here, but here's Bluesette, and you give them a goal and say, okay, you're going to recreate this piece with the melody that's built in, and use these kind of patterns, and have them, they can take notes. If these are students that have Logic, by the way, you can have them take notes and say, oh, I'm having trouble with this stuff. Like, what do I do here? And they can like send it back to you. So if you're asynchronous with individual students doing these kinds of activities, you can work on things like that. Let me show another example of that. Let's see, is it this one? Close that. I'm not going to save. Okay, here's another one. Kind of exercise over this, an etude on this. Kind of get into some language there. So, show them how to create. Now, all of this was built on, here's the melody, write in the chords yourself, and now create this type of left-hand pattern, or add the chords in the right hand, those kinds of things. So this isn't just like, hey, I wrote this tune. This is, oh, this was built for my student, so that they could figure out, what does it look like to play this on the piano if I use this style of left hand playing, or what if I use these style of chords, or what if I keep the chords simple. That's another way to use Logic for those kinds of students. So very, very score-based kind of stuff. So there's another example there. And of course, and one thing that I haven't mentioned that might be kind of interesting to some is you can, Dr. Gnong, you've used me this way a few times. If we have, for instance, maybe I've got a really old library and stuff's out of print, and all I've got is the conductor score, and I'm missing the horn and F and the timpani part, and I can find it in the score. Well, I can just kind of play it into Logic from the score and create those parts that are, either impossible to find or out of print. So that's another thing that's useful for us. Of course, that's more of a like summer project kind of thing. but depending on how comfortable you are with it, you might, get that done a lot pretty quickly. So there's some more examples there. Let's see. I just kind of talked about the extensions, so I don't need to go on about this stuff. Okay. I think that about covers it. So there's that end slide. And I can take some more questions right now, or we can wrap it up.
Amy, this was awesome.
Thank you so much.
You're a total whiz with this, and I know there's Studio One just came out with some notation plugin that's kind of like Logic One. So I think in maybe the next few years, Studio One might be a Windows alternative that could do some of the same stuff. But
Cool.
Logic is so fully featured right now in this, it's great.
Yeah, they're kind of lazy though. They need to know that they have competition, that they're coming for them.
It's coming for sure.
Jimmy, if you don't mind, I think I'm going to pass your name and Dr. Ganon's name on to the committee that's putting together whatever professional development in February in place of Allstate. They really want to focus on tech, obviously, this year because of all the hybrid and online environments. So if you two don't mind, I'll definitely pass your name along.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. Cool. So yeah, that's kind of funny that you mentioned that since I put it in here. I was thinking, it'd be really cool if we could get more educators to use this, and it's not just me, thinking, boy, how can I use this in my classroom? But if we got some other people looking at it, I know. Let's see. Over at Valley View, there's a director that has used it live in front of their classroom to just like play the parts for the student, and then all of a sudden he's got the whole thing for them, and they can hear it, even though he doesn't have a recording of it. Now he's got a recording right there for his students. He plays the snare part, plays the trumpet part, everything. So it's something you do on the fly really quickly.
Yeah, great. I think this solves a lot of those questions that were coming up in the summer. What do we do when we are on an A-B schedule and we don't see our groups full time? I mean, I think this really solves a lot of issues. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope this is useful to people out there.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I don't see anything else in the chat. So, like I said, this will be available by the end of this week on the IMEA YouTube channel. And if anyone has questions for Jimmy, he left his information on that last slide. Please feel free to reach out to him and reach out to the State Department of Ed or District 3 if you have any ideas on what you'd like to see next. And then we really appreciate you all being here tonight, and thank you so much. You're getting a lot of good jobs and thank yous.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well.